everyone coming. This is a topic that we wish we really didn't have to have a presentation for, but in the day that we live in and education becomes power, and all of us in this room realize that, we are so happy and so pleased that not only for one presentation, but also for a 7 o'clock presentation this evening, that a former YSU graduate, Mike Peterson, is with us today. Mike is not only a graduate of the institution in criminal justice, but he also serves on our board of trustees. And we were so pleased that he came to us and said, this is really important. And I'd really like to have a conversation with your university, with the students, with the faculty, and also with the community. And so we are pleased to have him with us today. Mike has nearly 30 years of experience in security consulting, human resource, and investigative services. He comes to us with a wealth of knowledge, and not the knowledge to be able to stop an active shooter from ever taking place, but the knowledge for each one of us to know what to do and to always trust that gut if we are ever, unfortunately, in that situation. So I welcome all of you today. I applaud you for taking time out of your day to be with us, and I please welcome and ask you to join me in welcoming Mike Peterson home to his alma mater and to the stage to be able to talk to us.
Thank you, everyone. I like being up here. First of all, let me correct something. So Shannon said that I volunteered to come here and speak. How the conversation went is the president grabbed me by the shirt and said, "You will come here and you'll speak and it'll be for free." So that's really how it went. I know, right? Listen, first of all, this is a very serious topic, and I get that. It's a very scary topic, and I get that. But let me explain to you what the goal is today. See, we already know what's scary, and we already know how heavy it is. The goal today is to do one thing. When you leave here, you'll feel empowered. That's the goal, okay? We see active shooters and workplace violence threats and issues going on around the country all the time. We're not fear-mongers. This is not for me to get you out here and tell you how scary it is, because you get that. But ladies and gentlemen, what you'll understand when we're done with this is that there are things you can do. Things you can do to minimize the risk of an active shooter or any workplace violence incident, and also, God forbid, if you're in that situation. So before I get going, I got to say a couple things. One, I use the word guys a lot. It's a genderless term, right? Just so you know. I'm telling you that because my wife's an FBI agent, and the first time I said guys to her, she got me by the throat. It was kind of scary, actually. And then, look, I would love to tell you that I'm not going to do this, but at some point today, I'm going to use the word dude. Okay, so if you're an English teacher, professor, I'm sorry. Forget about it. I can't. Okay, so workplace violence. So what is it all about, right? What's our job? What's our goal? What's our concern? The key to workplace violence, the key to active shooter, is preparation. It's very simple, right? That's what you're here for right now, preparation. You're going to say, well, but Mike, nothing's happened, so why would we be concerned? Like, we hope nothing happens. Guys, hope is not a strategy. In my world, coming from law enforcement, right, I will tell you this. Preparation is more important than crossing your fingers and wishing. Because what I've learned is the moment you prepare for it, you will feel empowered. That's what that's all about. You have a better chance of survival. And you guys know this, whether it's business or whatever the case may be. When you want to survive, when you want to achieve things, to excel, you don't go in and say, hey, I hope this goes well. You have a game plan, and that's what this is all about, right? So to kind of get this started, and I know there's students here, so we always talk about in the corporate sector is when you have people come into your company, right, do you know who they are, okay? When you have people like in football, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but I played at Youngstown State University, 13th leading tackle, but I don't want to bring that up. I'm not going to bring up that I was a free agent with the Miami Dolphins and then NFL Europe. As a matter of fact, give me this. Everybody raise your left hand. Put your fingers together. Snap them. That was my NFL career. But the key to that is, do you know who you're hiring? Right? Are you bringing the right people in? So we had a client one time, they came to us and they said, hey Mike, we were auditing our employment files. And we found this document where we were trying to verify someone's college education, and we looked at it and they couldn't verify. They said the university had closed. And they only had a letter from someone at the university. And the letter said, in regards to your investigation into Mike Peterson's tenure at this college, he graduated with a criminal justice degree with a 3.6 GPA. No, that's a lie. With the GPA. And I'm like, okay. Now, did anyone see anything wrong with that document? Anyone? No one? Let me ask you a question. What do you see wrong?
It's not official.
It's not official. Not official, that's one. What else? So just so you guys know, one of my areas of expertise, interviewing and interrogation, right? I love a good conversation. I'll have fun with you all day long, right? But so interviewing and interrogation, which means words matter. What was odd about the words in that document? Yes?
You knew in advance you'd be investigating?
Okay, so you said investigation is an issue, right? Pretty much. Let me ask you, have you ever looked at a transcript that had the word investigation in it? Do you know why he said investigation? Because in his mind, he knew he was doing something criminal. So your inquiring about his degree was an investigation. And the other part was tenure, right? So I read all that and I'm like, dude, we got a problem, right? So we actually launched an investigation. This guy had been employed now for over 6 months. So we went down and I interviewed him. By the time it was done, he admitted to creating 5 fictitious employees where he had collected about $300,000 because they had different levels. He had also demanded that one of his employees say that he was working for him and that he made $300,000 and he bought a house with it, got a bank loan. And the best part about it is this guy actually stole his neighbor's information for cable and cell phone, right? So you got to know who you're hiring. You got to know reference checks, background checks. You got to do that. By the way, ladies, college ladies, men, right? It's for you too. You got to know who you're talking to, right? I told my wife that I like shopping and reading. Hey, come on, right? No. But the point is, you want to know those things. You want to ask those questions. So that's important. So the next thing we're going to deal with is, let's talk about the 4 myths of workplace violence. The first one that I always hear about is people say, if someone wants to hurt you, there's nothing you can do. So guys, I'm going to tell you, that's a lie. So having worked in it, you're going to hear me say this a lot, but I've worked in law enforcement for a long time. And I was in a lot of different situations. And I will tell you, in some of those situations, I wasn't in the position to win. In some of those situations, I was reacting. But having that mindset that you can find a way to win is critical. So when people say to you, man, there's nothing you can do, absolutely. You guys are doing it right now. See, you don't have to be a law enforcement person to be able to be prepared for an active shooter incident. You don't have to be 6'2", 250 pounds to be prepared for an active shooter incident. Really, what you're doing right now, because when you leave here, you're going to think about it. When you leave here, you're going to talk about it. When you leave here, you're going to go back to your workplace and say, man, if I had to get out of this room, how would I do it? Guess what? You're ahead of the game. When you leave here and start thinking about it, you know you're prepared. See something, say something. One of the biggest issues we have, guys, is we are dismissive of what we see. See, we believe that we don't have to tell people because, well, I don't want to look silly. Right? Here's what I'm going to tell you. It is better to look silly than to be a statistic. That's my attitude. It is better for me to say, man, something. Matter of fact, let me tell you a story. So I'm speaking at an event at Walsh College, and on my way back, my wife calls me and she says, hey, Mike, can you stop by the store and get something? So I had to stop by Walmart, right? So I walk into Walmart, and as I'm walking out, there's a kid next to me, and I say he's a kid, probably 19, and he's kind of off to the side. I start walking, and he falls in behind me and starts walking, and I can't see him. Now, is that odd? I think it's odd. Now, keep in mind this. I'm 6'2", 240 pounds, right? Former law enforcement officer, right? Still commissioned by the state of Ohio, still carry my firearm on me. I could just dismiss that and be like, dude, I've been here before, no big deal. But I stopped. And I turned, and I looked at him. I said, how you doing? And why do we do that? Because that's right. Because whether you realize this or not, the reason why they have door greeters in stores is because there's a belief that if you acknowledge a person's existence, they are less likely to do something to you. So I acknowledged him. I said, how you doing? And he said, fine. And I turned around and started walking again. And then sure enough, he fell right back behind me. Now my gut's going, right? We got a problem. Even though I'm still carrying a firearm, 6'2", 220 pounds, right? Check so y'all were listening, right?
Sweating off that way.
But that's right, I was sweating like crazy, you're right. I gotta bring you along. I stopped, and I went back into the store. Guess what he did? He stopped, and he went off in a different direction. So look, I don't know what that guy was gonna do. I don't know if he had anything planned. I really don't. But I do know this. God gave us all that feeling, and you don't ignore it. And I say that because when you're in school, or you're in your company or corporation, or you're at home, or you're at the shopping mall, and something doesn't feel right, there's a reason. And by the way, maybe nothing happens. But the minute we dismiss it, we ignore it, we now leave it up to hope. So having done, I don't know, a couple thousand, or managed a couple thousand investigations on workplace violence, here's what I will tell you. The smallest one to the largest one, you have to acknowledge. Because you can say, man, nothing will happen, but you just don't know. It will never happen here. That's a myth. We love to say it'll never happen here. So let me just tell you, every company that had an active shooter incident never had an active shooter incident until they had an active shooter incident. Every school that had an active shooter incident never had an active shooter incident until they had an active shooter incident. Every store that had an active shooter incident never had an active shooter incident until they had an active shooter incident. Meaning they were just like the people in this room. They were just like you. And that's not a fear statement, right? That's a fact statement. So now that we know that, now we know what we have to do. Now that we know that there were a group of people probably sitting in a room at some store or some office listening to a great presentation, just like this one, right? Don't laugh on that one, right? And then all of a sudden they heard pop, 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 pop. And their lives changed. They were just like the people in this room. So that myth is gone. Myth 3, you cannot predict workplace violence. Do you guys believe you can predict workplace violence? So let me just tell you. There are several ways. And most of the time, you know them. When you hear someone make a comment, make a threat, they're angry. Well, you don't know whether they're going to carry it out. But what do? Do you go to your HR manager and say, hey, listen, Mike was upset today, and he just made a comment that he was going to do A, B, C, and D, and I just think you should know about it. So when I talk to people about this, the thing they tell me is, look, Mike, I would love to tell someone, but I don't want that guy to lose his job. I don't want that guy to get in trouble. So a client of ours called us one time, they said, hey, listen, we have this issue. We did a survey, an anonymous survey, and in that anonymous survey, and it was nationwide, right? There was a threat communicated, and the threat went something like this. To all you senior level executives, I'm going to find you and hunt you down. I'm going to kill you and your families. Whether it's me shoot you, or you open up your mailbox to an explosive ordnance device, I will kill you. And they said, Mike, we know it's an anonymous survey. What can you do? Well, it's an anonymous survey, but there are things you can do. So we're able to locate what time this particular survey was done, able to locate the state it was in, able to locate the location it was in, and the time it was done. So now we have it down to a couple hundred people. So now we got to figure out of those 200-300 people, who wrote it. So what was the one communication? Remember I told you I'm a word guy, right? What was in that communication that was odd? Anyone know? Gonna hunt you down, kill you, you're going to, shoot you, explosive ordnance device, all that. Yes, ma'am.
Specifically senior executive.
Senior executive is one, but what words differentiated them from everyone else? Yes.
I think he's got details in there as how he's going to do it.
Yes, but more specifically, because you're right on there. Yes.
Because he used explosive ordnance.
There you go.
Might
Right.
indicate he was a military.
There it is. There it is. The president's giving you a $100 gift certificate to the school. That's it. Because EOD means what? Military. So we went and we started looking at applications for guys that were in the military. We found a guy that's a former Marine. So we call a FBI friend of ours and we tell them what was going on, and they're going to go out and they do some research. Well, in the interim, we talked to the manager, right? And so I was going to the manager and I said, hey, what can you tell me about this guy? And this guy, by the way, this guy was a big guy, right? And he said, well, I got to tell you, Mike, this guy was a little crazy. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Well, at one point, I walk into the locker room and he's sitting there and he's naked and he's rocking back and forth, and I ask him what's going on, and all of a sudden he just screams and yells and starts swearing like crazy. Like, what'd you do? He's like, oh, Mike, I let him calm down. Well, who did you tell? Well, I didn't tell anyone. I just let him calm down. Okay. And he said, oh, by the way, and when that happens, it's never good, right? By the way, it's rumored that he had an addiction to crystal meth. And oh, Mike, look at his picture when he was hired, and look at it now. He said, well, who did you tell? I didn't tell anyone, because it was just a rumor. So you didn't tell HR? No. The police go out to this guy's house, and they confront him. And he denies it. Now, he does what I call an admitted denial, but he denies it. Turns around later, shoots and kills himself. Okay? Here's the thing that could have easily started and ended at this facility. Had that manager said something to someone, he could have actually saved that guy's life. Look, guys, here's the thing. The old days of just firing someone because they make a threat, those days are gone. Right? So you don't just always fire someone. Sometimes you do, depending on the threat. Sometimes you want to get them help. Why is that? So years ago, right, I was part of an investigation of a shooting in Cincinnati. The supply chain, they had delivering trucks in and out, and the guy who was fired a year from the day he was terminated drove from North Carolina to Cincinnati and shot 5 people. A year to the day he was terminated. Now, by just letting him go and not getting him any sort of counseling, maybe that was the problem. Right? And sometimes counseling is important. I love it. People say, no, you get rid of them. Listen, sometimes, regardless of what you think, people need that help. And by the way, that help, that counseling, is letting the air out of the balloon, right? Our goal is we don't want the balloon to pop. So let me ask you a question. What's your name right there, ma'am? What is it? Maria. You remember, like, if you're upset and maybe someone passed away in your family and you're trying to hold it in, if I walked up to you and put my hand on your shoulder and said, Maria, it's going to be okay, what typically happens? Yeah, and you let go, and you start crying. You let it all out. All that stuff that was pent up, you let out. Guys, doing this, getting involved, figuring out what's going on with people, that's huge. You cannot just be dismissive of it. You can't let it go. There were 2 guards walking into a federal prison. And one guard said to the other, they saw a supervisor. And he said, you know what, man? I could put a bullet between that guy's eyes right now. Like, I just don't like it. No big deal. They walk away. It's prison. Big deal. Right? I mean, prisons, they talk that way. But this guard thought something was odd about what he said. So he went and told his supervisor. Supervisor, the very next day, they stopped the guard and made the threat. Before he gets in, they said, hey, listen, we want to talk to you because we have some concerns. But before we do, I want to go out to your car and search it. They go out to the car and they find several long rifles and thousands of rounds of ammo. So it matters. It matters. And guess what, guys? You're it. You're going to be the one that, because I'll tell you, management's not going to do it because they won't know about it half the time. Right? Typically, it's going to be you that hears something, that sees something, and maybe it's just small. And you sit and you think, well, wait a minute, so now we're becoming a state where we're telling everyone? Absolutely not. But listen, look at every shooting. Look at who they communicated to. You always watch those people that stand up right after when the news is out and they're talking to them. They're like, oh, I knew he was crazy. Oh, I knew he was going to do this. Right? Well, who did you tell? No one. That's a huge difference, right? So we've gone to those indicators of, are they angry? Do they change their behavior? Are they now becoming confrontational all the time? And by the way, these by themselves does not mean someone's going to go shoot themselves or go shoot up a bunch of people. That's not it. But keep in mind this. There are 2 million workplace violence incidents a year. And by you sitting down and saying, man, that guy seems to have an issue, or there's something wrong with him, maybe we should get HR to talk to him, we could change that. People ignore those signs, and things occur. Number 4, preventing workplace violence is not my responsibility. Is it? Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Right? That's why you're in here now. Because you know it's your responsibility. You want to know that, how do I stop it? Hey guys, listen. So I'm going to tell you, the biggest thing you can do is, you think of it this way. Can you imagine having a situation where there was an active shooter incident and one of your husband or your wife or your kids were there involved, and then you later find out that someone knew something and didn't say it? Right? I want you to start treating these challenges and these issues and things you come across that way. I want you to start saying, man, what would I do if someone had this information and didn't tell someone? That's a big deal, right? But the bottom line is, it's our responsibility. Everyone. Who knows about Spider-Man? Anyone here a Spider-Man fan? You know? So how did Spider-Man ever come into existence? Go ahead.
Me?
Yes. How did
How did Spider-Man come into
Yes.
existence? Did he get bit by a spider?
Yep.
And Uncle Ben was his uncle, right?
Oh man, I love you. I just love you. Just keep going. You guys, give us a minute. This is awesome. Anyone that knows Spider-Man is all about it. Go ahead.
So am I wrong?
No, you're right. You're right. You get the $100 gift certificate
Oh
too.
yeah, no, and then his aunt died.
Right.
She got shot, right?
Uncle. So here's what happened. Thank you very much. You rock. Right? So Peter Parker is bit by a spider, and he then goes and tries to make money. And so he goes to become a wrestler. Doesn't go well. And as he's walking out, a policeman's chasing a bad guy who just stole money from the wrestling group. And the cop says to Peter Parker, hey, stop that guy. And Peter can, but he doesn't. And he lets the guy go. And the police officer said to Peter, why didn't you stop him? Peter's response wasn't my job, wasn't my responsibility. What happened later is the guy goes outside, hijacks a car, and kills Peter's uncle. The point to that is, it is your responsibility. It's all our responsibility, right? All of us have some sort of responsibility to make sure that those things change. Look, in 2013, I think they said fatal workplace injuries in the United States that were classified as homicides, 9% of all workplace deaths were because of homicide. CNN did that story. Is that not crazy? Just so you know, that number's double, right? So it's not a question of if it's going to happen. It's a question of when. How you're going to be prepared for it. This is it. This is why you're here, right? You're going to be aware. It's going to change everything. But here's the thing, guys. So one thing that we look at is okay, how does this impact us in school or in businesses or whatever? You know, we actually have some of the same challenges that are out in society, right? So we look at bias behaviors, right? Out of about 6,000 single bias hate crime incidents, ethnicity was 11%. We have that in the workplace. Religion, sexual orientation, racial. It's actually no different when you talk about bullies, right? Who would have thought that, and this number has shocked me, by age 24, 60% of all bullies have been convicted of some sort of charge, at least one time. Male bullies are nearly 4 times as likely as non-male bullies to grow up to physically or sexually assault their partner. Wow, you didn't think about that. And then the other piece of the concern is mental health. About 80% of those active shooter folks claim some sort of mental health issue. Now, this isn't an indictment on mental health, by the way. right? This is not a mental health issue. It's just that that's what they're claiming. So that's what we're dealing with. So let's look at industry. Does it impact us from an industry standpoint? I think this pretty much covers everyone. If you look at what's out there, guys, keep in mind, this is just companies. We're not talking about the Walmart sheet. We're not talking about in the theater in Denver. Right? There's a complete change. But those are the issues you're dealing with. And this, in the end, is what we're trying to avoid. So it's important for us to think, man, how do we address that? Are you going to be willing to say something when you see something? So I had a client one time, one of our clients called us and said, hey, Mike, listen, we kind of have this issue, we're not sure what to do with it. One of our female managers called us and said, I was in my office, it was 7 o'clock, and I get a call from her boss. And her boss says, hey, can you come outside? My car won't start, and I need some help. Now, their building was actually kind of a storefront and backed up to an alley, okay? So she said, yeah, but she just felt weird by the way he was talking to her, like 7 o'clock at night. So she said yes, and then she called her husband. She just went with her gut. She called her husband and said, hey, can you stay on the phone with me? And he said, sure. So they go out, she goes out the door, and he's standing right there. Literally, instantly, he's like right in her face. And he said, who are you talking to? So I'm talking to my husband. And you could tell he got a little startled. So he said, my car won't start, can you help me? She gets in the car, she starts it right up. So she calls HR, and that's a little strange, a little odd. Don't you agree? So they called us and they say, so what do you think? And I said, okay, that is some odd behavior. All right, I'm gonna go with my gut. So I said, let's do this. Before we go any further, let's check his internet usage. I just wanna see what's out there, right? We check his internet usage. Does anyone know what we find? Who said? What?
Porn.
Pornography. That's right. Right? That's a really weird, who said that? Okay, you're going to be hired as an investigator too. That's actually, most people don't say that, right? Just means you and I are both twisted. But, I like this, right? So, we said, okay, now we got a problem. So we then fly out to, it was in Baton Rouge, we fly out there, I fly with the HR manager, and we meet him, and I tell him who I am, and I tell him I'm an investigator, and we're here to investigate this, and all of a sudden, guys, this guy, he started pouring sweat. He was nervous, he was pouring sweat like crazy, right? So I see all that, and what do you think I do? I go to lunch, right? So I go to lunch, I let him simmer. So I go to lunch, I let him simmer, and we get back like an hour later. It's actually a good lunch too. I get back an hour later, and we sit down, and I said, okay, all right. I said, so Cliff, here's the deal. We got an issue. I sit down with the HR person. I said, we have an issue, and you know what it is. So tell me about it. And he just kind of looks at me, and he starts answering. I said, Cliff, before you start, I need you to be honest. I've flown from Michigan to Louisiana because I know what's going on. So do you. So let's be honest. And Cliff puts his head down, and he looks at me and he goes, you mean the expense reports? At which time I say, yeah, the expense reports. So Cliff proceeds to tell us about the thousands of dollars worth of fraud that he committed on the expense reports. Right? By the way, we had no idea about that. So, you know, I'm just looking better by this day goes on, right? So we talked about that for a while. And then when we're done with that, I say, hey, Cliff, we got one more issue, bro. And you know what that is. And then, to make sure he knew exactly what I was talking about, the HR person was a woman. I said, don't be uncomfortable because she's sitting. And he drops his head, and he looks at me and he goes, you mean prostitute? At which point I said, yes. So here's what happens. Cliff would watch pornography after hours. He would then call the prostitute and be serviced. On that particular day, though, during the interview, he couldn't get a hold of her. That's what he told me. He couldn't get a hold of her. Now, what did that mean? What would have happened? Had she not followed her gut? Guys, Had she not followed her gut, her life could have been changed. Had I not followed my gut, we wouldn't have known. So that's what this is all about. This is what we're trying to avoid. And before we talk about anything else, you can talk about all the security in the world, and security is important. But if you really want to have impactful security and ways to minimize the risk of ever having, I'm not saying it's 100%, but to minimize the risk and to help other people, you seeing something, saying something is the biggest difference. Your commitment to that. Look at this. Just in October, the amount of shootings that have occurred, mass shootings. Now guys, there used to be a time when I started this job, if I'd ever gone to an HR department and said, hey, I want to talk about active shooter, they would have thrown me out. Right? This is becoming common for us now. But here's the problem. I'm going to give my public service announcement right now. I want you all to change your perspective of what you see up here. Every one of you. Here's what I want. Because up here, you see the net number of people who are killed and injured. That's what it is, right? It's a number of people killed and injured. But I don't want you to look at it that way. I want you to look at this person as Jane Smith, 32 years old, with 2 kids. Great job. Or maybe Timmy Johnson, just got out of college, looking forward to his first job. Stop looking at them as numbers and look at them as people, and then you'll get it. Then you'll understand why we want to be so serious about saying it. And oh, hey, by the way, just so you know, if you think I'm telling you anything that I don't know from experience, 2 years ago, I dropped my daughter off at middle school. As I'm driving off about 10 minutes down the road, I get a phone call from an FBI buddy of mine who says, hey, Mike, where are you? I told him, he said, hey, dude, you got to turn around and get back to school. There's been a shooting. I said, what do you mean? It's been a shooting. So we get back to the school. A kid had accidentally, he had brought a gun to school to do a mass shooting and accidentally shot himself. Now, let me tell you, that was a game changer for me. Right? I mean, all of a sudden now, guys, I still get choked up telling that story. But check this out. If there's anyone here that doubts that this conversation does not change lives, listen to this. So my 2 daughters, who were in 6th grade and 8th grade, who I've talked to before about active shooting, right? I didn't do a presentation like this, right? But I talked to. After that incident occurred, one of the professors or teachers came up to me and said, hey, Mike, let me tell you about your daughter. When we locked everyone down, she grabbed staplers and books, and she handed them out to students. Okay? Handed them out to students. And said, if they come in, you throw it. Now, let me tell you, I was so proud of my daughter that day. Dude, I could have headbutted her. I'm dead serious. It was like, no, mind you, check this out, though. Check this out. But still, I just got to say, I got to get this off my chest real quick. So it's funny because these are the same girls that I coached lacrosse, and I gave this great motivational speech one day, right? And these kids went out and they killed this team, and this team was supposed to beat us 5 times over. And the parents came up to me and they said, hey, Mike, what a great job, man. Our kids were talking about how great you motivated them, and they were so excited, and so on and so forth. And I said, okay. I said, Ava, what did you think about my speech? She's like, Dad, I wasn't really listening. I'm back to being Mike again. All right. But guys, so think about that. Just that age, prepared for it. When you go home, that's what I mean though. See, this is the thing. When you leave here, right, and everyone's like, oh, that scary topic. Yeah, it's scary. But when you leave here, you'll be prepared. People ask me all the time, because I get to travel all over the crazy world. I'm in the Middle East sometimes, and in Colombia and Mexico and Turkey, whatever. And people always ask me, like, hey, dude, are you ever like scared? Ever paranoid? I'm like, no. You want to know why? Not because I'm 6'2", 210 pounds, right? It's not it. The reason why I'm not scared is this. I listen to my gut, and I trust it. Simple as that. I don't ignore. If I feel like there's something wrong, okay, I'm gonna make an alteration in my behavior, right? That's what that's all about. So, the other thing I want to share with you is someone always asks me, we eventually get to this, and someone say, well, so why do you think these shootings continue to occur? And this is my opinion, okay? This is my opinion. But much like the shooting at my kid's school, when you listen to what this kid wrote, he talked about everyone knowing his name when this is over. He talked about being bigger than Columbine. He talked about it. And look at the other shootings. Matter of fact, you guys remember Timothy McVeigh? Right? Let's think about Timothy McVeigh for a minute. This is a guy, he blows up the federal building, he gets in a car with no license plate. Now this guy is smart. He gets in a car with no license plate and drives down the highway. And when he gets out, he's got a .45 shoulder ring. And when the police ask him for his license, he says, doesn't have one. You think he's hoping to get caught? I'm going to tell you, if he's trying not to, he's doing a poor job. What did they find in his back seat? Plain as day. What's that? No, his manifesto. Couldn't wait to tell you what he thought. So my public service announcement is, if we could get rid of sharing all this information, right? If we can stop making these people feel as though they are great because they're bigger than Columbine, guys, think of every single shooter. So it's interesting because the vast majority of these, you're going to find this out later in our presentation, the vast majority of these people know they're not going to survive. So what are they going off of? I can tell you, they're going off of the last shooter. That publicity, that notoriety. And then let me make myself feel even more like I'm doing injustice and tell you it's because of the injustices of the world, and that's the reason why I'm doing it. And then they can call me a mass murderer. That's what we have to change. But if you don't believe me, just listen to this. Listen to what he says. This is a shooter in Florida.
Hello. My name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018. My goal is at least 20 people with an AR-15 and a couple tracer rounds. I think I can do a good job. Location is Stone Douglas in Parkland, Florida. It's going to be a big event.
Watch, here it comes.
And when you see me on the news, you'll want to know who I am. You're all going to die.
Okay, a couple things about that. One, did anyone catch what he was saying? He was trying to sound scary. He was trying to present this movie type, Hollywood type of presentation. Just the fact that he made a comment when he said, I'm going to shoot my AR-15 with 223 rounds and a tracer round. That's him trying to sound like he's military. That's him trying to sound like he's scary and organized. And even at the end, if you listen to how he said it. So part of my belief, and I'm just throwing this out there, I'm not looking for debate, whatever, I mean, it's just my belief, is that notoriety, every time I see it, I know another one's coming. And I'm not saying that'll stop it if you get rid of it, but that's the issue. But so we look at these shootings and we say, okay, all right, so Mike, I get it. Now you say that we need to, let people know when there are issues, identify issues, and I get that. So why won't the police take care of this for us? Well, it's a great question, right? So when you look at the Aurora Theater shooting, it took the police 1 minute and 5 seconds to get there. 12 people were killed, 70 were injured. The Safeway shooting took the police 2 minutes. 6 people killed, 14 injured. Columbine, 3 minutes. 13 killed, 24 injured. And the Navy Yard, which by the way, was probably the most disturbing one of them all, because I've seen that video. And this is the person who literally spent his time avoiding law enforcement so he can take as many lives as possible, right? 12 people killed, 7 injured. It took them 6 minutes. Now, keep in mind, guys, things have changed, right? So when you look at the old way law enforcement would respond, law enforcement, typically, they would roll up. Columbine was a great example. Law enforcement would roll up. Patrol officers would get out. They would secure the perimeter. SWAT would be called. SWAT would come in, they'd get a briefing, they'd deploy out to the scene, and then go to work. Well, let me ask you, what's going on with all that's happening? Right. So the new way we're taught, the way we're trained now, is if Mike Peterson's the first person through the door, I go directly to the threat. There's no more waiting. If you're by yourself, you go directly to the threat. Because of this. And here's what's crazy. And so someone said, like, wait a minute, a minute, 0.5 seconds? Like, that's quick. Why so many lives lost? Well, just because law enforcement shows up doesn't mean they know where to go. See, like here at the university, and I will say this about this university, and look, take it however you want to, but forget I'm a trustee, and that I went to school here. I am very blunt when it comes to security, and I don't pull any punches about anyone, about what they do and don't. The fact that this university has taken on what it's taken on, from a law enforcement standpoint, to train their people and get them prepared from a security standpoint. See, that's one of those things you can always tell when someone's committed, when they're developing or committing resources that don't have a return on it. Now you know they're committed, right? So you guys are very fortunate to have here a law enforcement department that's actually one of the best in the country, that actually train and prepare for these very situations, right? So always remember that. But I will tell you, unlike in most situations, when law enforcement here responds, they're going to know where to go. Typically, law enforcement would say, hey, go to the Kill Collie Center. Oh, okay, I'm here. Now where do I go? Kill Collie Center is a big place, right? So if you think about, it takes, even in that amount of time, short time, so most of the casualties occur before law enforcement gets there. So let me ask you a question. If that's the case, if most of the casualties occur when law enforcement gets there, whose responsibility is your safety?
Yours.
What's that?
Yours.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't care whether you are 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. I told you not to sit there, President. I'm sorry. Okay. That's the best part of my day. You can have an impact. You don't have to be Mike Peterson, law enforcement. You just got to trust your gut. You just got to say to yourself, hey man, I'm prepared. I'll tell you, we had a call one time, law enforcement, and two guys were on this porch selling drugs, and I was working in Vice, and we rolled up to this house, and there were two guys on the porch. And the one guy comes off the porch and he starts talking about partner and I. And he's just going a mile a minute. Oh, hey officers, how you doing? This is the reason why we're here, we're just hanging out. Then there's a guy standing on the porch and not saying a word. Now let me ask you, who do you pay attention to? The quiet one. Why? Because he's processing. He's thinking, right? So as my partner's dealing with that guy, I'm staying and I'm watching this guy. And so I tell the gentleman, I said, hey, can you take your hands out of your pocket? He's standing on the porch and I'm about 5 or 6 steps down. And I said, sir, can you take your hands out of your pocket? And he just stares at me and never says a word. Now, do we have a problem?
Yes.
Oh, we've got a problem. We got a big problem. Now the problem is officer safety. Now I got to think, this guy really is processing. He's making a decision. So I say to him again, hey, take your hands out of your pocket. And before I get the word pocket out, I run up the steps, jam him up against the wall, shove my hand in his pocket, and I'm squeezing his hand because I feel like he has something in his pocket. And when I finally get him to open it up, and I pull it out, it's a Raven 25 semi-automatic gun. What was he doing? He was debating. Had I went with my gut, had not gone with my gut, and told him to take his hands out of his pocket, I would have been in trouble. But something told me right when I said that I don't want him to take his hands out of his pocket. And guys, once again, that's just how we're wired. God has given us all spidey senses, right? He's all given, I know we keep Hey, I'm in Spider-Man, right? He's all given us that gut that says something's not right, and we've got to deal with it, right? So it is your responsibility. The problem is the way we've been taught. We've been typically taught fight, flight, or freeze, right? Typically more freeze than anything else, right? We've been taught to do what? Shelter in place, right? That's up until after Columbine. Because then this company came about, it's called ALICE. And ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, Evacuate. And they looked at this situation and said, wait a minute, something's got to change. The way we're being trained, we're setting ourselves up for failure, right? We're setting ourselves up to be hurt, injured, or worse. So they came up with this training, and then all of a sudden, it just took off. Federal buildings, they get it, they see it, right? Corporations are doing it, schools are doing it, right? That's for the school. But what do we do for the individual? Fight, flight, or freeze. What do we do for you? How does this work that when you leave here, you can take the same attitude in this building and take it to a Giant Eagle if you're at a grocery store? Or if you're at a sporting event? I want to play this for you. This is a 911 tape from Columbine. Now, I'm going to tell you, it can be a little disturbing, okay? But listen to the teaching. If you remember correctly, Columbine had the highest casualties of that shooting, okay? The library had the highest casualties of that shooting. Listen to this teacher who is inside the library. Listen to what she is telling the students. And you can hear, at some point, you can hear the shooting, the rounds going off in the background. Just listen to it.
Do we know where he's at? I'm sorry? Do we know where he's at? Okay. I'm like, he's up here. He's right outside of here. He's outside? He's outside of the hall. Outside of the hall or outside of the hall? Okay. There are alarms being put off. There's smoke. I thought smoke is like coming into this room. Okay. I've got the kids on the table here. I don't know what's happening in the rest of the room.
She just said I've got the kids under the table.
Just 1 minute to call me 911. Yes, we got a lot of people on. Okay. I just want you to stay in the line with me. We need to know what's going on. Okay. Okay? I am on the floor. Okay. You got the kids there? And I've got every student in this library on the side and I'm down the block. Isn't that when you come off the doors? Someone's coming in from out there. I'm alone. Okay. The guy is right outside the library.
Okay. You heard what she said, right? What was she telling? Under the table, on the floor. Here's what you don't know. There's a door to get out, about 80 feet from where they were. And she wasn't wrong. She did exactly what she was trained to do. But they could have gotten out. Well, what they were taught, what we all were taught, was shelter in place. That fight, flight, or freeze. This is another video. If you guys remember a couple years ago, the Paris attack, terrorism. A good friend of mine actually worked for the gendarme, and he was there at the time. Watch this video and I'll explain it to you. So this is a video of a cafe, and you'll see up top in the circle, what you see right there around going off inside the cafe. You're going to see in the circle, that's the terrorist. Okay? He's going to disappear and he's going to come back into the picture. Okay, here he comes. He's coming back now. And you're going to see that he actually starts walking over towards the door. He turns, he sees two people, takes his gun, he shoots, but his gun jams. So he walks away. And then about 3 seconds later, two women get up and they leave. So guys, here's the thing. Look, I'm not judging them. They weren't wrong. But think about what they did. They left their life up to fate. Like, even in that moment, with that gun pointed directly at them, they thought there was nothing they can do. Guys, listen to me. You got to trust me in this. Right? I don't care what anyone says. Listen to someone who's been there. You can still do things even in that situation. I want you to keep in mind this. Even bad active shooters, even active shooters, go through traumatic experiences, right? And people say, well, Mike, how is it I can hide from them? Listen, I've talked to folks that literally, active shooters have walked into a room and they've literally been on the backside of a wall and they never saw them. Why is that? Guess what? They're going through their own traumatic experience. Any law enforcement people in here? Okay, you going through a situation where you're fighting someone armed, where you potentially may have to take someone's life, I will tell you what you go through. The very first time I had that, I was arresting a guy that I knew had a warrant. It was a very bad tactical thing on my part. Stopped the car, had 3 people in it, knew the driver had a warrant, got him out of the car, called for backup, right? As I'm handcuffing him, the guy in the front passenger seat keeps moving his hand off the dashboard. I keep telling him, put it back, put it back. All right, red flag, now we know, okay? All of a sudden, he starts to do this. He starts to go to his jacket. We got a problem, right? So as I'm yelling for him to show me his hands, now all of a sudden, the guy that I'm handcuffing is trying to distract me and fight me. And he keeps saying to the other guy, do it. Now we got a problem. So as the guy gets out the car, my gun is drawn, and I'm about ready to squeeze the trigger. And he gets out, and he takes off running. Put my gun in my holster. I turn around. As I'm turning, 2 officers are chasing this guy. Behind me are 3 cruisers going lights and sirens. I never heard them. They're literally right behind me. I never heard them. Because you go through that traumatic experience. You go through that tunnel vision. Your hearing cuts out. It's the same thing with an active shooter. They've never been in that situation as well. So the things you're going to do, the way you're going to fight it, is key. So we're going to do this. Our job right now, your focus is to remember these 3 words. Run, hide, fight. All right? Not fight, flight, or freeze. Run, hide, fight. Which means very simple. 80 to 90% of the people that run an active shooter survive. I can stop this presentation right now. Right? 80 to 90% of the people that run in an active shooter survive. Equally so, those that hide, I won't say hide, freeze, are injured. Now hiding is different. So we say hide up here, but hiding is different than freezing. And then fight. So that's the one I was talking about with the terrorists, right? So you're in that situation, you gotta ask yourself, what did you do? When I was putting this presentation together, I ran it by some of my friends in the HR community and asked them what they thought, and they came to this slide, and they're like, yeah, we don't like the word fight. You gotta come up with something else, like, you know, successfully resist. Any HR people in here? Love you, right? Right? You know why I love HR people? You don't know why, really? Because you're hated more than security people. That's why. Anyway, I'm going to be in so much trouble. All right. So, the word fight is very simple, guys. It's what you will have to do. It's what has been done, and people survive. Whether they have been older, younger, male, female, it doesn't matter. You've got to have that mindset. If you have no way out, your only choice is to fight. You'll fight. Now, how do I know this works? It's very simple. It's a great example of what we're talking about, right? Virginia Tech shooting. Okay? You guys remember the Virginia Tech shooting? Okay. In room 206, there were 14 people present. 10 were killed and 2 were wounded. They sheltered in place. They stayed in place. In room 211, 19 people there. 12 killed, 6 wounded. Sheltered in place. How do we know that? We heard the shooting in one room, and they were still there in the other. In room 207, 13 present, 5 killed, 6 wounded. Sheltered in place. In room 204, where they ran, got out any way they could, 2 killed, 3 wounded. And in room 205, 12 present, 0 killed, and 0 wounded. It's very simple. Right? If you can get out, you get out. And if you can't get out, you hide. But if there's no hiding, you got to fight. In that situation, they removed themselves, guys. They got out of the way. So we said, okay, how do we know we're pushing this run, hide, fight well, and that we should be doing that? Because maybe maybe if we allow them to, if we hide more, then maybe they'll stop shooting. So we said, okay, we'll take 202 incidents, right? New York City looked at this and they said, let's look at that and see how they ended up. That'll tell us what we should be teaching, right? So out of 202 incidents, those that ended in applied force, there were 93 of them, 46% ended in applied force, meaning law enforcement either tackled them or, put their weapon on them and they gave up or shot. No applied force, ended with them giving up, 28 of those. That's 14%. Suicide, attempted suicide, 80 of them, 40%. Think about that. And then those that ran, less than 1%. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? They're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere, right? So now it comes back to what we said. It comes back to you, right? You, the shopper, you, the business owner, you, the employee, you, the student, it all comes back to you, right? Listen, the only thing that stops a good guy with a gun, or a bad guy with a gun, is a good guy with a gun. Now let me just tell you, I said that in Oklahoma one time. It got really weird, because they all apparently carry guns in Oklahoma, so they all got excited. I'm like, no guys, I don't want you coming in with guns, right? It was crazy. But it's very true. Like that story I told you earlier about the kid that shot himself, right? Essentially, that's what happened. So here's what you can plan on. You can plan on that ending through one of these 4 ways. Police intervention, suicide, weapon malfunction, or civilian intervention. You're getting involved, making a difference. So let's go back to that Paris video, and you say, you look at that and say, Mike, what can I do? How do I stop someone with a gun? Well, here's the thing, right? So we use this phrase called OODA loop. Anyone ever heard of OODA loop? Okay, so let me just tell you, being 53, using the word OODA loop really kind of makes me uneasy, because I just feel like I'm smarter than that. But it works. Observe, orient, decide, and act, right? So what does that mean? So here's the deal. If, what's your name, sir? Brian. Brian, let me ask you, if I took some tissue right now, balled it up, and I threw it at you, what would you do? Yeah. Catch it, maybe block it, right? So think about what he just said, right? I'm going to take that tissue and throw it at him, and he's going to block it. Is that tissue going to hurt you? Absolutely not. But guess what? We can't just say like that, oh, it's not going to hurt us. They say it takes 0.27 seconds for us to identify what's going on, analyze what's going on, and respond to it. For those of you in law enforcement, as you know, that's a lot to do a lot. So now I'm taking that tissue, and if a person has a weapon, it goes from here to here, right? Or they stop or they block. And you think, that's kind of silly. Guys, guess what I'm telling you? I'm telling you what people have done in real active shooter incidents. How they have survived. I'm not telling you something that I thought up or that I think may work. I'm telling you it actually works. I'm telling you that typically you can't control that behavior. Law enforcement or otherwise. That OODA makes a huge difference, which means simply this. You have a low level of interruption, a high level of accuracy. You have a high level of interruption, low level of accuracy. For law enforcement, for those in law enforcement, right, when we train, we have sirens going off, music playing behind us, and it tries to see how it impedes our shooting. That's how we train, right? And I can go through anything, sirens, country music, all that stuff. They played Lawrence Welk one time, and dude, I lost it. I couldn't hit a target. Right? But that's what's huge. It makes a huge difference. It has an impact. So what can you do now? Are we going to bring this up? Are we going to bring it to a close? Dude, see something, say something. You see it, say it. Don't ignore it. Guys, that's the biggest part of this presentation for me. Because having worked workplace violence incidents and threats, I can tell you that more than anything else will have huge impact. Do you have a plan in place? Do you have a reporting plan in place? Can your employees call a 1-800 number, an anonymous tip line? Do you have something in place that if you own a business or something like that, you have where someone's going through a divorce and their husband's made a threat or their wife's made a threat, there's some protection order? Do you have something in place so they're aware of it, that you, the company, are aware of it? Are you committed as a student to say, listen, I know we were out, this guy was maybe intoxicated, he made the comments that he or she made, but I've got to tell someone just in case? That's going to be the key to your success. And oh, by the way, listen to this, and this is what's interesting. Courts now are holding companies, schools, responsible. So think about this. You're not a security company, right? You're a Walmart. University. You don't know anything about security. The courts are now holding us liable, responsible. So if you're an employee, it's your obligation to make sure you do what you need to do per your policy to protect your people. Right? It's important that you understand what that process is. And it's important for you, the company, you, the school, you, the whomever, to have a process, a plan in place to make a huge difference. That you're planning preparation, educate your associates, do what we're doing right here, right now. Right? So think about this, right? I will guarantee you someone will say, oh, I don't know if we should have these type of trainings here. But guess what? Your university, your community, has committed to protecting you, to giving you the resources you need to be successful in your endeavors outside of this wall. So it makes a huge difference. Mitigation. Your physical security. Companies, do you have a good security plan? Or do you know who's coming in and out of your facility? Right? That's a huge thing. Making sure we keep, and look, it's so funny because I have these conversations, even in your house, right? People are, I always try to explain to people, security is such an easy thing, right? Your job is to be a bad victim, right? That's your job. So to be a bad victim means that, man, if I see some strange guy walking behind me as I'm walking to my car and I'm by myself, I'm just going to hit my alarm keypad and draw a bunch of noise until I get to my car. Because I just didn't feel right. It just felt odd, right? Or I see someone walking around, I'm just going to go back in and say, hey, you know what, just so you guys know, there's a guy outside. Maybe he's not doing anything, but he's just acting odd. I want to give you a heads up. Bad victim turns your porch lights on at night, front and back. And then people will say, well, Mike, come on, don't get paranoid. Well, let me tell you, I've interviewed bad guys all my life. So I know what they like. They like the person that ignores their gut. They like the person who likes a really dark household on the outside, right? I told a friend this one time, I told him, like, dude, you should leave your porch light on and your back light on, and he kind of blew it off. That's not true. A couple months later, house got broken into. Actually, 2 in their neighborhood. They were the only 2 that had all their lights out, right? Now, I was not very kind to him, right? I let him know that I told him so via text, and I called him a couple times. Response. What do we do? Guys, that empowerment piece we talked about when you leave here, what are you going to do? What are you going to think about? Are you ready? Are you going to share it? Are you going to talk about it? Because trust me, you're better off now than you were before. Not because of the speaker. I mean, the speaker's great, don't get me wrong. But it's more so because of the information you have. Because now you know, wait a minute, I can survive. I can do something to survive. And not only that, I can do something to minimize the risk of this ever happening. You can do that. And then we're reuniting in counseling services. So our reminders, guys, run, hide, fight. If you can get away, get away. Make sure you don't worry about your belongings. Just get out. Help other people if they want to get out, and guess what? If they don't, well then you have to go. Call 911 when you're safe. Hide. Lock in or barricade the doors. believe me, there's a shooting that occurred in New Zealand, and I hope no one ever saw that video. But I watched it, and in that video, he's basically tapping on doors, right? You don't know whether they're locked or not, because he's going through his own traumatic experience. So he's just going through the motion, right? Hide behind large objects, and people will say, well, Mike, what about glass and things like that? Guys, listen to me, and I'll say it again. You know, there's a lot that goes on. You can hide, however, if you get behind a bunch of chairs, get behind them. Be quiet. Turn your cell phones off. Take your phone off the hook. Make sure they don't ring, because a ring or vibrate, that catches someone's attention. And then lastly, fight. Act with aggression. That's all I have to say there. Be committed to act with aggression. Be committed. Your will to win over their will to hurt you. Your will to survive over their will to hurt you. I'm going to show you a video real quick. It's a Department of Homeland Security video. And what I will tell you, it's a little shocking in the beginning, okay? But it speaks to and shows exactly what we were talking about.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes, bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority. Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911. If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. If your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
All right, so that video says it all, right? When you leave here, think about it, how you'd respond. And I'm going to tell you, you'll go home and you'll want to talk about it and share it. Because frankly, I had no idea that my 12-year-old daughter would actually pay attention. Nor would I have any idea that less than a year later, she'd actually be applying it. Right? Guys, it's a scary topic. I totally get that. But where you are now, if you listen to what we talked about today, if you think about what you would do, if you share it and you talk about it, trust me when I tell you, you're ahead of the game. It's a huge thing. You know, my wife and I told you my wife's an FBI agent. We talk about things, most of the time she doesn't, you know, I like talk security, and she's like had enough of work, and so she, another person that doesn't listen to me. But anyway, so we talk periodically about security and what we want to have done. And one day, we have a very elaborate alarm system at our house, and we have 4 sensors. So, you know, unless you're like Tom Cruise, you're not going to get in our house without us knowing it, right? So one night, it was raining really hard. Our girls were much younger, and they were sleeping in our bed because they were afraid of the storm. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, the alarm goes off. Now, our alarm never goes off by accident, unless we set it off. 3 o'clock in the morning, it goes off. We got a problem. I jump out of bed, my wife jumps out of bed. She goes to our little spot, and as I'm going down the door, she carefully tosses me my firearm and then the magazine, because it's unloaded when she tosses it, the firearm. And I catch it, I load the magazine up, and then I go downstairs. Now I gotta tell you, tactically, that was pretty sound. It was like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith moment. What we realized is that it was the storm that shook the floor that caused the alarm to go off. Now let me just tell you, my wife and I never talked about that, right? We never talked about a Mr. and Mrs. Smith. But she knew what I was gonna do, and I had a pretty good idea what she was gonna do, even though we had never been in that situation. And 2 things came to mind. 1, I'm so glad we talked about it. And 2, dude, you were so hot to me right now. The way she did that, it was ridiculous. It was crazy. I'm gonna leave you guys with this. I can't say this enough. Share information. Let people know when you see something. Don't ignore it. HR, as like here, HR professionals are equipped to handle reports. And we get reports all the time, insignificant, and we address them. If there are no issues, they get addressed. But man, if you don't say something and you're wrong, wow. If you don't do something because you feel like something's wrong and you ignore it, wow. And guys, I don't say, all of a sudden, you feel weird, so you start rolling around on the floor. I'm not saying that. Just don't ignore your gut. If there's something wrong, take another look at it. Trust it. I wear 3 bracelets on my wrist, and I'm going to share them with you. The first bracelet is in honor of an officer friend of mine that I lost in 1996. We were working an assignment. I was working a Friday, and he worked it Saturday. Saturday, he was shot with a guy trying to break into this location, and 2 days later, he passed away. But I wear this bracelet for this reason. I wasn't there when Brian was shot, but they said that after he was shot, he kept trying to get up. And even when they tried to hold him down, he kept trying to get up. Guys, that's like life, man. You got to keep getting up. You got to keep trying. When something knocks you down, when there's an issue, get up. When a bad guy or a bad situation comes before you, stand up. Don't accept defeat or failure. The second bracelet on my wrist is a turtle that my daughter's getting me. And I love this because I thought, turtle always brings its game plan with it. No matter what the situation, he wears it or she wears it on their back. Even if it's something new they've gone through, they've got a plan. And they're ready to execute. You've got a plan. You've got a plan to provide a safe work environment. You've got a plan that, God forbid, if you're in this situation, you can survive. You've got a plan. And then the last bracelet is a bracelet I wear from a tactical organization that I belong to. And I'll tell you what the whole thing says, but the first part says fight. And I can stop right there. Fight. For your safety, your security, fight. For your goals and your dreams, fight. For your family, fight. For what's right, fight. But what this says, you'll understand, is this says fight. Fight like the third monkey on the ramp to Noah's Ark. Thank you guys very much.